Though House Targaryen had conquered the Seven Kingdoms with fire and blood, they did not rule with it. Once the Iron Throne had cooled, their fire had tempered, and in doing so, they brought peace and stability to Westeros for many, many years. Yet all this would change with the passing of Aegon the Conqueror and the ascension of the Sons of the Dragon. Aenys came first. Though a kind and amiable man, he proved weak-willed and indecisive. His reign was marred by numerous rebellions and revolts, but it was the Faith Militant uprising that ultimately claimed his life. This gave rise to a far more merciless king, one who would bathe his enemies in blood and fire. Thus was the life of Maegor the Cruel. Born on Dragonstone in 12 AC, Maegor Targaryen was the second-born son of Aegon the Dragon, the first by his elder sister wife, Visenya. As a child, he was stronger and healthier than his half-brother Aenys. The two were never close, as Aenys would often travel with their father on Dragonback, while Maegor was raised by his mother on Dragonstone. For this, he became known to both lords and commons alike as the Prince of Dragonstone. From an early age, Maegor had an appetite for swordplay and was trained by some of the finest masters of arms in the realm. By the time he was 12, he bested seasoned men-at-arms and even hardened knights in the melee. And by the time he was 13, Visenya bestowed her own Valyrian sword, Dark Sister, upon her son. But his ferocity was matched only by his relentless cruelty. It was said that he butchered cats, palfreys, even stable boys who dared to cross his path. In later years, this would serve as a warning for what the boy would become. In its long history, House Targaryen has wed brothers to sisters for centuries. And yet, neither of the Conqueror's wives had given him any daughters, so the Sons of the Dragon had no sisters to wed. Instead, Aenys married his cousin, Alys Velaryon, in 22 AC, and produced a daughter the following year, Princess Rhaena. This sparked a question of succession, whether Maegor remained second in line to the throne or fallen to third. Visenya proposed a betrothal between her own son and the newborn princess, but her parents vehemently protested, as did the High Septon. So instead, Maegor wed the High Septon's niece, the Lady Cerys Hightower, in 25 AC. But despite his numerous attempts to produce an heir, their marriage remained barren. And in all that time, Aenys and Alyssa would go on to produce 4 more children, pushing Maegor further down in the line of succession. But where he had fallen short in procreation, he more than made up for with his martial prowess. In the Great Tourney of Riverrun, he unhorsed 3 knights of the Kingsguard and defeated all his foes in the melee. In recognition of his skills, Maegor was knighted by his father, King Aegon himself, becoming the youngest knight in the Seven Kingdoms. In the years that followed, Maegor would undertake in many campaigns against pirates and robber knights. In all that time, he gained a reputation for savagery and harshness to all his defeated foes. Yet despite his achievements, Maegor remained dragonless. Though he was offered dragon eggs on many occasions, he refused them all, becoming a source of mockery. But in Maegor's mind, there was only one dragon worthy of him. In 37 AC, Aegon the Conqueror died on Dragonstone, and his son Aenys succeeded him as King of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, and Protector of the Realm. When Maegor knelt before him, Aenys drew him back.
Brother, you need never kneel to me again. We shall rule this realm together, you and I.
And with that, Aenys presented their father's sword, Blackfire, and gifted it to Maegor.
You are more fit to bear this blade than me. Wield it in my service, and I shall be content.
In the wake of their father's passing, Maegor finally claimed the dragon he had long desired. None other than Balerion the Black Dread, the greatest of all the Targaryen dragons. Their first challenge came when half the realm rose in rebellion against Aenys' rule. When Jonos Aaron seized the Eyrie and declared himself king of Mountain and Vale, Maegor descended upon the mountain stronghold astride Balerion. The very sight of the Black Dread's wings cowed the garrison into surrender. But Maegor was not of a forgiving mind. He had every man hung by the noose. Though brutal in his tactics, they ultimately restored the king's peace to the Vale of Arryn. As a token of his appreciation, King Aenys made his brother the Hand of the King, and for years, the Sons of the Dragon ruled over Westeros peacefully. But this all ended in 39 AC, when at last he declared Cerys Hightower Baron. On Dragonstone, he took Alys Haraway to bride in the Valyrian rite, officiated by his mother, the Dowager Queen Visenya. The scandal enraged the faithful all across the realm, and it forced King Aenys to exile his brother from the Seven Kingdoms. Maegor took his new bride, Balerion, and Blackfire with him. For years, Maegor lingered in exile in Pentos, waiting for the right opportunity to return. His chance came in 42 AC, when Aenys Targaryen died on Dragonstone as the Faith rose in rebellion against the Iron Throne. In the wake of his death, Visenya flew to Pentos on her dragon Vhagar, recalling her son back to the Seven Kingdoms. As a second son and exile, Maegor was never meant to rule. But no sooner did he hear of his brother's death than he flew Balerion to Dragonstone and claimed their father's Valyrian steel crown as his own. Only Grandmaster Garwin dared object that the throne should pass to his elder brother's firstborn son, Prince Aegon. To that, Maegor infamously said,
"The Iron Throne will go to the man who has the strength to seize it."
And for his insolence, Maegor declared the Grandmaster a traitor and took Garwin's wrinkled old head himself with Blackfire. After that, few others dared to support Aegon's claim. Ravens flew, declaring that a new king had been crowned, one who would treat his loyal supporters justly and bring a traitor's death to those who would oppose him. Chief among his enemies was the Faith Militant, the orders of the Warrior Sons and the Poor Fellows. In King's Landing, the two militant orders had seized control over much of the city, making the Sept of Remembrance into their citadel. But Maegor and his mother flew straight into the city upon their dragons and raised the Targaryen standard on Visenya's hill. Thousands flocked to their side. Visenya challenged anyone who would oppose her son's rule to prove themselves, and the warrior sons were quick to answer. Their Grand Captain, Daemon Morgan, called Daemon the Devout, demanded a trial of 7, an ancient form of trial by combat, wherein 7 champions would face 7 champions. Daemon the Devout's warrior sons and Maegor 7 were locked in mortal combat, where the fate of the kingdom stood in the balance. The accounts and tales of the fight were many, and most of them contradictory. But in the end, none of it mattered, for Maegor alone stood triumphant, but not before being dealt a grievous blow to the head, rendering him unconscious. For 28 days, Maegor Targaryen lingered at the point of death until Alys returned to Westeros with a black-haired Pentoshi woman called Lyanna of the Tower. She had been Maegor's lover during his time in exile and was a reputed practitioner of the dark arts. Visenya dismissed her sons Septons and Maesters and gave the king over to Lyanna's care alone. And on the 30th day, Maegor rose from his stupor. Thousands cheered all throughout the city, but the revels died away when Maegor mounted Balerion and set the Sept of Remembrance alight in dragonfire, killing every single warrior son within. This would cripple the Order's strength for good and all. Not long thereafter, Maegor took Lyanna of the Tower as a third wife, despite the objections of Grand Maester Myros, who was summarily executed by the king. His brother's widow, Queen Alyssa, and their youngest children were made hostages under the supervision of Queen Visenya, while his nephew, Prince Viserys, became the king's squire. Meanwhile, his eldest nephew and niece, Aegon and Rhaena, remained defiant to his rule, taking refuge at Casterly Rock, where Rhaena gave birth to their twin daughters, Arya and Rhaella. Despite the king's demands, Lord Lyman Lannister refused to turn over the fugitive prince and princess, invoking the ancient law of guest right. Yet even so, he dared not declare for the youth who soon became known as Aegon the Uncrowned. But they were but a nuisance next to the power of the Faith Militant. Maegor's wars against them would continue all throughout his reign. Each time they took up arms against him, the king would humble them, reducing their host into ash and cinders. The Riverlands, the Westerlands, and the Reach were all set alight in a merciless campaign to root out disloyal lords, and those who spoke out against him had their lands and incomes confiscated. Such was the case when Lord Ormond Osgrey protested the king's suppression of the swords and stars. Maegor stripped him of his seat of Coldmoat, leaving him only the small tower keep of Standfast. Finally, in 43 AC, Maegor and his mother turned their dragons on Oldtown. But in the middle of the night, the High Septon died under mysterious circumstances, and a far more pliable one was raised in his stead. In Oldtown, Maegor was welcomed with open arms, and the new High Septon blessed and anointed the king with holy oils. And it was there that he reconciled with his first wife, Cerys Hightower, agreeing to restore her rights and privileges as his lawful queen, on the condition that she recognize his other brides. At the High Septon's command, the Faith Militant was officially disbanded. Maegor placed bounties on the heads of the warrior sons and poor fellows who refused to lay down their arms. But this did little to end the conflict. Though they could no longer raise levies against the king, the swords and stars turned to banditry instead, killing any Targaryen loyalist wherever they could. But during Maegor's time in Oldtown, his wayward nephew and niece snuck into King's Landing with help from certain members of the king's court. But their aim was not to seize the Iron Throne. It was dragons they were after. Rhaena was reunited with her beloved Dreamfire, while Aegon finally laid claim to his late father's dragon, Quicksilver. Then they flew back to the west to raise an army. At Pink Maiden, the seat of House Piper, Aegon the Uncrowned rallied thousands of Westermen and Riverlords to his side. By the time they left for King's Landing, more than 15,000 men marched beneath Aegon's banner. Even so, none of the great houses would dare to openly support the uncrowned prince. But the spies in Queen Lyanna's employ claimed that the Baratheons, Arryns, Starks, and Lannisters had all informed Queen Alyssa that they would declare for Aegon, provided he won a victory against his uncle. And that Maegor could not allow. Far from the capital, Maegor couldn't rally an army to match Aegon's, so he ordered his banners to swarm Aegon's larger army on all sides, confusing the young prince and slowing his advance. Beneath the god's eye, Maegor's disparate forces came together and attacked Aegon's, as Maegor himself emerged from the clouds. For the first time since the doom of Valyria, dragon fought dragon in the sky. But Quicksilver was no match for Balerion the Dread, who was 4 times her size. He ripped a wing off the younger, smaller dragon, sending her and her royal rider plummeting to their deaths. With Aegon fallen, his army broke and ran. Over 2,000 men died that day. For slaying his own nephew, Maegor the First Targaryen forever after became known as Maegor the Cruel. Upon his return to King's Landing, he finalized the construction of the Red Keep in 45 AC. It had begun under Aegon the Dragon and continued by Aenys, but it was Maegor who saw it finished. But he went far beyond what his father had envisioned. False walls and secret passages were built, and a castle within the castle was constructed, a royal residence that became known as Maegor's Holdfast. But even this achievement was met with horror. When the keep was at last completed, the king threw a riotous feast for the masons, carvers, and other craftsmen who had labored on the castle. Afterward, his knights stormed in and put every single one of them to the sword, for only the blood of the dragon would know the secrets of the fortress the Dragon Lords had built. And no sooner was it completed when Maegor cleared the remains of the Sept of Remembrance and ordered the construction of an immense domed castle, a great stone stable for the royal dragons, a lair worthy of Balerion, Vhagar, and all who would follow them. Though he would never live to see it completed, this great keep would be known as the Dragon Pit. It was also at this time when Cerys Hightower died under mysterious circumstances. Officially, she died of a fever, but rumors spread that she was killed on Maegor's orders over a shrewish remark. But above all else, Maegor became obsessed with producing an heir to supplant his brother's last surviving children. Yet no matter how many times he bedded his wives, he remained childless. In 44 AC, his second wife, Queen Alys, miscarried, and Maegor saw the monstrous abomination. In his black rage, Maegor executed Grand Maester Desmond and the Queen's midwives. His third wife, Tyanna of the Tower, accused Alys Harroway of adultery and produced a list of potential fathers of the misshapen child. Not only did Maegor execute his second wife and her father, his own hand of the king, but he also marched upon their family seat of Harrenhal and butchered every single man, woman, and child who bore a drop of her family's blood. Thus began the rumors that Harrenhal was cursed, that every lord who held it would meet a bad and evil end. Even so, his knights clamored to claim the castle for themselves, so much so that Maegor declared that it would go to the strongest man. After a vicious and bloody melee, Walton Towers became the new lord of Harrenhal. Upon his return to the capital, he received dire news. His mother, Queen Visenya, had died. From the moment she had born him into the world, she had been Maegor's staunchest ally, always advocating on his behalf. she had ever been the voice of reason, and without her guidance, Maegor's actions became even harsher and crueler. Worse still, her wards, Queen Alyssa and her children, Jaehaerys and Alysanne, had fled Dragonstone in the middle of the night with the dragons Vermithor and Silverwing, and the Blade, Dark Sister. In retribution, Maegor tortured his nephew, Prince Viserys, to death. Desperate to cement his stolen throne with an heir, Maegor took 3 wives at once, the ladies Eleanor Costaigne and Jane Westerling, and his niece, Princess Rhaena Targaryen. All 3 women became known as the Black Brides, for all had been widowed by the king, women of proven fertility. In the absence of a son, Maegor named Rhaena's eldest daughter, Arya, as his heir. In that same decree, his nephew Jaehaerys, the rightful heir to the Iron Throne, was disinherited. But the only children born of Maegor's seed proved to be monstrosities, misshapen, eyeless, limbless, or having the parts of men and women both. The people saw this as an ill omen that the 7 themselves had turned against the king, for slaying his own nephew, for making war against the faith, and for his other cruelties. Maegor, on the other hand, turned his fury on Tyanna of the Tower. Under torture, she confessed her responsibility for the king's abominations, that she herself had poisoned Maegor's other brides. She was killed by Maegor's own hand in 48 AC, her black heart cut out with black fire and thrown to his dogs. By that time, much of the realm had turned against Maegor. The scattered remnants of the Faith Militant took more aggressive steps against the king. An army of poor fellows marched onto Old Town under the fat Septon moon, with support from the lords Rowan and Oakheart, and what remained of the warrior sons were led by Joffrey Doggett, the Red Dog of the Hills, with the support from the Tullys of Riverrun. And reports claimed that the Dornishmen were marshalling an army, preparing to invade the realm. But the greatest threat came from Storm's End. After their flight from Dragonstone, Queen Alyssa and their children took refuge with Lord Rhaegar Baratheon. On the shores of Shipbreaker Bay, the Lord of Storm's End declared the young Jaehaerys Targaryen to be the true and lawful king of the Andals, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, and the prince in turn named Lord Rhaegar Protector of the Realm and Hand of the King. With Dark Sister in hand, the young prince vowed to end the reign of his tyrannical uncle, and the Storm Lords rallied to his side. As word spread, Queen Rhaena seized the moment and fled the Red Keep with her dragon Dreamfire, her daughter Arya, and Maegor's Valyrian steel blade, Blackfire. More defections followed. Maegor's admiral, Lord Daemon Velaryon, abandoned the king and joined his nephew with his royal fleet, as did 2 of Maegor's Kingsguard, Oliver Bracken and Raymond Mallory. Grand Maester Bennifer, having learned from his 3 immediate predecessors, fled across the narrow sea to Pentos. The Lannisters, Tyrells, and Arryns soon joined, adding more than half the might of Westeros to the young prince. Maegor's response was slow and confused. He summoned his loyal lords to King's Landing, but those who came were only minor lords of the Crown Lands, those that had little to marshal against the king's many enemies. It was late at night when the remaining lords left the council chamber, leaving Maegor to brood on the Iron Throne. The next morning, he was found dead, with one of the throne's blades jutting from his throat. No one knows for certain how he died. Some say it was his last surviving queen, in a final act of revenge. Others that it was one of his Kingsguard, or could have been one of the thousands who wanted him dead. Legends even claim that the throne itself had rejected him. But the most likely explanation is that he tasted despair in the middle of the night and took his own life. However it happened, the reign of Maegor the Cruel ended in the 48th year after the conquest. It had begun with blood, and so it ended in blood as well. Throughout his life, his only passions were war and battle. But it was violence he most craved. Violence and death, and complete domination over all those beneath him. The wives he took lived and died at his pleasure, and those who dared oppose him were reduced to ash and embers. But though he was a blood-drenched tyrant, his actions did, in the end, save the Targaryen dynasty from destruction. The weaknesses of his brother's reign had nearly destroyed the realm that their father had forged. But it was Maegor's decisiveness that cemented Targaryen supremacy over Westeros for many generations to come. And though his crimes and cruelties were justly reviled, the laws and institutions he left behind did not die with him. Maegor's laws, as they were called, declared that the Seven would have no more need of swords. Henceforth, the Iron Throne would defend the faith against all enemies, and so it would be for more than 200 years. Yet above all else, Maegor Targaryen reminded the lords and commons of the Seven Kingdoms that the dragon's fire still burned hot and must never be trifled with. Even so, his nephew would do much and more to repair the deep wounds he had made in the realm. And from his ascension, a golden age would dawn on Westeros, a time of peace and plenty, where justice would be known to one and all, from lord to common.